start everything.
Okay, yeah, I'm recording. Are you recording?
Uh, I am recording now.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, so then I guess I could go ahead and just start the intro since we don't have to wait for nobody. So,
Yep.
hi, how's it going? Welcome to another BioDevils podcast. Today is going to be a smaller podcast, and it's going to be more focused on some of the news relating to Silent Hill 2 Remake, or much more rather, Blooper Team themselves. And just some of our concerns about like where this remake could be heading as far as like the overall quality and stuff like that. Obviously, we don't have any sort of gameplay to really reference how this game is really going to turn out until we've seen a full-on gameplay reveal and breakdown of that. But this is just more or less our general speculation on how things are going to turn out. But without any further delays, to introduce myself, you all know me as BioDevil Dom or BioDevil underscore Dom, and I'm joined here by a special guest here, Captain Chaos. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, so I'm a pretty big Silent Hill fan, at least of the original Team Silent games. So, of course, when I heard about the remake, I had some concerns, mostly because I know of the developers' history and the other games they've done,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's something like I really want to be optimistic about because like I said, I really love the original games, but I'm just not sure. A lot of this really has to do with, I would say I'd speak for probably both of us when I say I'm not sure. I'm not really confident, I guess, that Bloober Team's the right people, the right developer for the job.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
a lot of I would say a lot of our issues probably stem from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, kind of like how you were saying, like you speaking for both of us on like just not feeling about how Blooper Team is. I know both you and I, and definitely a couple of other people that we talked to in our server, are we're on the same page of like, well, this is Konami, and how is Konami gonna fuck this up? Who are they gonna pick in order to work on this remake? If this, when this was just a rumor at the time, right? Nobody really knew what was gonna happen um, until they finally made an announcement showing that yes, it is a legitimate remake that is happening, but it's also being done by a team that, as far as I'm aware of, has only done very mediocre games for the most part.
Yeah. Um, the problem with Bloober Team is that most of their games, up until I would say, I guess the medium, have been pretty similar, and they've all just kind of been your typical, you know, it, as you would call it, a run and hide simulator. I mean, well, not even really that actually. Um, the Layers of Fear, for instance, is I would compare it more to basically a haunted house simulator because you're not really even running and hiding from the monster. You're pretty much just experiencing the scares, and it's more of a walking simulator, if anything. Uh, the only game where I would say they tried to do something different, of course, was the Medium, which I haven't played, so I can't really judge it. I've heard a lot of things about it, but I can't, like I said, I can't really judge that, but I can judge their previous works, which I have not really been impressed with because it's mostly just following the trend, that kind of trend. Um, and I haven't really seen anything that's really impressed me, um, from what they've done. I mean, I would agree with the idea that that they're fairly mediocre from from what I've seen of their work. Uh,
Yeah.
Nothing has really, like I said, nothing has really stood out to me, and nothing has really, told me that they're the right team for the job. The only thing, like, the medium is, from what I've heard, is definitely is inspired by Silent Hill.
Mm.
Um, but that might be as far as it goes. Maybe it's just, a surface level thing. For what I've seen of the gameplay, um, it's it definitely has the atmosphere, from what I can tell, of a Silent Hill game, but it's not so much the gameplay and yeah, I the narrative. It feels like it's maybe somewhat inspired by Silent Hill 2 to a certain extent. Um, but yeah, it's really hard to say without having played it myself. I'm just going off of what I've seen of it. Uh, but the medium as well, I definitely wouldn't call it survival horror either. Um, it's it's
Isn't that more
definitely
of
more
a like a walking sim basically?
that, yeah, I would say it's much more like that.
Because I've seen a little bit of the medium,
Hmm.
and as far as that game is concerned, like the medium it definitely piqued my interest as far as like just trying it out as like a, oh, here's like this. I don't know if you could really call Blooper Team like an indie team per se, but like um, here's a game that has like some elements of Silent Hill and maybe there's something good in it. I've seen tidbits of the gameplay, but I have no idea what the story is about. And I know that um, some of the tracks were done by Akira Yamaoka, and I'm wondering if maybe that connection is what led them to even be um,
That
like
was my
picked.
inclination.
You know?
Yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
that was what I assumed because they had worked with Akira Yamaoka before. Like, I'm not sure if Konami is basing it off of that. Like they have, they will because they've worked with Akira Yamaoka. That maybe that and also because it's a game that isn't somewhat inspired by Silent Hill. Maybe that's what they based their decision off of. But it's Konami, so I don't think they really thought too hard about it. Honestly, they just kind of it's it's probably just that they picked they really did, like I said, they didn't put much thought into it. Um, there's so many better choices though, and that's kind of what really what really annoys me about the Bloober team doing this in the first place
Oh
is
yeah,
that yeah.
I'm like right there with you on that because like you know, and I was saying this from even before they were picked to do you know this remake. I was saying like you know if this was even going to be a legit thing before they even had announced it, like do people really want Konami to do a new Silent Hill 2 remake? Because going off of their
Mhm.
history, post everything post Team Silent has been very mixed. I know like some of the earlier post Team Silent games um, have been seen or have been received with more of a positive light over recent years. Like that, like people look at them as like, oh, they're not as bad as like some of the later post Team Silent games or like the Silent Hill HD collection.
The only ones that
Um,
come to mind in that regard are like Origins and maybe Origins and Downpour, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
I've heard
which is
I've
funny
heard.
because one of the articles that
Mhm.
we're going to be referencing, uh, I guess one of the writers behind what was it? I guess Origins,
Mhm.
is saying he's concerned about the remake. But to be fair, reading more into the article, it seems like he's more so criticizing the idea of remakes in general, I guess, and not so much just saying like he's
Yeah,
concerned about that remake in particular.
yeah. Well, and we'll definitely like dive into that in just a moment here and really like
Yeah,
break that down because like I think the headline itself is a little bit misleading on that article
yeah.
compared to what he actually says, which is typical. But you know we'll get into it in a moment. Um, but yeah, I was asking that particular question a lot. Was like, okay, well, like, do people really want a Silent Hill remake or even just a new Silent Hill in general from Konami, knowing full well how Konami has handled this franchise in the past? Um, you know, I would much rather that Konami just get rid of Silent Hill and be done with it. You know, just not have any connection to it whatsoever. So that way, you know, maybe another team that or another company or studio or whatever, right? That does actually care to somewhat, you know, like to make a decent enough Silent Hill game, because I don't think we'll ever get, even if we do get a good Silent Hill game, I don't think we'll ever get a Silent Hill game that is like on the level of the level of quality of the first four Silent Hill games, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think that's probably going to happen, and definitely not anytime soon. Um, I think people were just kind of hoping that Konami will, I don't know, go through some kind of redemption arc like Capcom has, but honestly, I don't think it's going to happen.
I think
Konami has proven time and again they really don't care.
right,
Um,
and I think like if Konami really wanted to go on this quote unquote redemption, right, like they would have had to have redone the Silent Hill HD collection and actually make it quality. I think that would have been the very first step, is to try to like be like, hey, like, yeah, we know we fucked it up the first time, but this time we actually did put in some effort, and this time it is actually going to function properly and look the way that it should and sound the way that it should, not and not be all messed up, because like there's a whole bunch of different issues with that whole collection that honestly will suffice for its own standalone video someday, perhaps. Um,
Honestly, it just feels like Konami remembered that they even own Silent Hill as a franchise because the
right.
series has been lying dormant for so long, and now all of a sudden we get all these announcements for these new Silent Hill projects that are being
They,
worked on.
they remember they don't just make pachinko machines and skateboards, so
Yeah.
and that Silent Hill is more than just that. Because remember, they first did a pachinko game right after announcing Castlevania Erotic Violence, which, yes, that's an actual title. Um, and
Erotic
then
violence.
and then they released skateboards, and I mean, cool, I guess, if you like skateboards, or if you just like, because I know like with the more like collectible stuff, you want to like mount that stuff just to kind of show off the artwork on the boards and stuff like that. That's fine and all, but I also think it's like, well, like now you're just capitalizing on a franchise that you're not utilizing. It's kind of a similar situation with other Japanese companies that own certain franchises and don't utilize those franchises, even though they do capitalize on that franchise in other ways. So it's a
Yeah.
very it's just a very strange thing. And now of course we are getting the Silent Hill 2 remake. We are getting Townsfall. We're getting F. And I forget I think there was like a fourth one, but I forget the
Oh, yeah, I think
um,
uh it was that live service game. I think it was
yeah.
something. It was some generic name. It was like Requiem or something like that. I forget
We
what it
we
was
talked
called.
about it a while ago on the other
Yeah.
podcast when we talked about the Silent Hill
That game, I've
announcements.
said it before, but I think that game is DOA. I think
Yeah,
I don't know who is interested in that and who's going to play it. But it's definitely not a Silent Hill fans.
I
Um,
think it was Ascension. I think that's what it was called.
Ascension.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it was.
So, but like, yeah, no, and I agree, and I think and I think I said it in that previous podcast too. Like, Silent Hill 1 would have made more sense for a remake if you really wanted to gauge interest for a remake. Silent Hill 1. We
Okay. So
mhm.
I hate to defend the idea what they're doing, but I can tell you why it's being remade, and it's because Silent Hill 2 is the most popular game,
Oh, yeah,
the most well-known game in the series,
yeah,
and
I'm very well
that's
aware.
exactly why it's getting, Silent Hill 2 in particular is getting a remake. Now, I do agree. I think it would make more sense to go back to Silent Hill 1, and it's the game that I think most needs a remake because it's a PS1 title.
Yeah,
Um, but
and
I
the
think it's just mainly just due to its Silent Hill 2's
oh,
popularity,
yeah,
if
yeah,
anything.
and I'm not disagreeing with that notion, because I've had this conversation with some of the other guys too, and I was saying like, yeah, like I think that they should have remade one, and like the first thing that comes is like, yeah, but like they're remaking it because it's the popular one, right? Like that's how they should have.
Mm.
That's how Capcom should have done it with Resident Evils. Do the more popular ones first before even touching, or like like how Square is doing FF7 right before some of the other FFs. Although they technically have remade some other Final Fantasy games before, so
Yeah.
anyway. The thing is that like yeah, like I get it. It's yes, it's the most popular one, but I also think like there's a couple of reasons why I think like okay, Konami's dumb for not doing the first one. Aside from the fact that yes, it's the first game and it's a PS1 game, is the fact that the quote unquote remake or retelling that we had, which is Shattered Memories, is not a good retelling. In the sense of like, well, it's a run and hide sim, and yeah, it has some interesting ideas in there, but like for the most part, like it's like if you wanted to play a good iteration of Silent Hill 1, you're just gonna have to stick with the PS1 Silent Hill 1. There's no other way around it. Um,
Yeah, which is unfortunate
yeah, and I
because
think
it's one of the best, it's one of the best survival horror games ever made, and it's just a
mm,
shame that, we don't have any kind of a remaster or remake or any other way to experience that game other than, going back and playing it on the PS1.
yeah,
Um,
and I think the other issue that I take with this is that like you know being that Silent Hill 2 is the more popular one. If Konami fucks up or I'm sorry, did I say Silent Hill 1? I meant to say Silent Hill 2.
mhm.
Silent Hill 2 being that it is the more popular one, if they mess up this remake, like they're never going to hear the end of this, right? Like I'm not saying that that wouldn't be the case with Silent Hill 1 as well, but I don't think it would be as bad because if they mess up Silent Hill 1, it's like there are more fans of Silent Hill 2 than there are of 1, and that's just the reality of it, right? And you are going to get people that prefer that new iteration of Silent Hill 1 if it were to happen, right? But that's obviously not the route that they're going with. So, uh, but
Yeah.
with
So
teams,
I guess we should
mhm.
probably just kind of, well, just real quick. I guess we just kind of go over like what we do know so far
Yeah,
about
we
what the Silent Hill 2 remake. We know that they are obviously it's more than likely. I think they've kind of hinted at least as much. It's probably going to be a reimagining to some extent. Um, the one thing we can criticize is the the model for James is one thing that I think immediately will stand out to people when they see that trailer. Um, yeah,
it,
just
it looks bad.
not really. Yeah, it doesn't look good. Uh, and it makes me question how are the other characters gonna look? Are they going to look even close to their original counterparts? Um, I can also, I think we can compare, what Capcom's been doing with their remakes, in terms of how they've casted, the people that play those characters in their
Mm.
games, and how I feel like they've been pretty good with that. Um, and I think it's a pretty good comparison. Like, is it going to be anything like what they've been doing, like for instance with the Resident Evil remakes, and in terms of them trying to be accurate to how the original characters appeared? I don't know. It's going to be
You,
really interesting
you know what
when
else
we
is a
do see those.
you know
Yeah,
what else is a very good comparison to the Like a Dragon games or Yakuza games, if you will.
yeah,
Those are, for the most part, when it comes to their cutscenes and their character models, they are 1-to-1 as far as remaking them. The only exception is Ishin, because Ishin, at least the localized version for us, right, is it doesn't have the Kiwami subtitle to it, but it does in Japan, and it is a remake.
yeah,
And with that game, they swapped out some of the character models for some of the newer characters that were featured in some of the more recent Like a Dragon or Yakuza games, which honestly didn't really hurt that game in any sense. It was just a hey, we have some better character models that just look a little bit better, or we just think that they would fit better for this remake. So I think
mhm,
that's like an exception to the rule, more so than the standard, right? because you also have things like the Dead Space remake, which Dead Space remake did make some very noticeable changes to the character models, but for the most part, they look all right.
Yeah, I would agree. One other thing too, like as I mentioned before that it seemed like they were at least hinting at that it was going to be a reimagining of sorts. Because they did mention, I can't remember where I saw this, but I think they stated that the story was going to be changed to some extent to cater to modern sensibilities or the quote unquote modern audience, which we've heard quite a few times before from whenever people are talking about a project they're working on, if it's like a remake, for instance, that, well, I guess they're kind of saying like this kind of thing wouldn't fly today, so we're going to make changes so that it's like I said, it fits with modern sensibilities. Um, but I kind of wonder about that at the same time because I say that because of what I know from what they've done with the story of the medium. The thing that I was concerned about when they said that with Silent Hill 2 remake in particular is
Uh,
that that they would change certain things about like the reveal in regards to oh, okay, you found it.
yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say like I didn't want
I was
to
gonna say
cut you off.
some of the reveals in regards to James's character
Mm.
and the reason why he's there, what happened with his wife in particular, like that kind of stuff. I don't want them to change. I don't want them to really change that. I think that's really important to like the overall like message and the core of the story.
Well, and
Um,
I think
well, I
that's
was gonna say real quick. I I don't know if they will do that at the same time, and because what they did with the story of the medium is they tackled some pretty heavy subject matter in regards to like sexual abuse and all that. So
mm,
I kind of wonder if they are going to change that stuff. But them saying that does have me a little bit concerned. So I'm not really sure.
the thing with and to get the exact quote, it was uh, they wanted to adjust scare factors for contemporary audiences, which is just
Uh,
a fancy way of saying modern audience. Um, the thing with them, like even just making adjustments to the story for a modern audience, I already think they've already showed that they've done that, and not in a good way by, for example, changing James's face and making him older, because they did confirm that he's older in this remake. Um,
well,
I
also just real quick, we
mhm.
see him in the trailer like react more, uh,
Exactly,
to
yeah.
things.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. Like it's him reacting a very specific way and stuff like that. I think to me that's what really is going, like, hurting this remake for me at least. And granted, I do want to. I'd be lying if I was gonna say that I would never give this game a shot at least, because I could be wrong, right?
Mm.
And I do want to give this game a shot. I do want to be proven wrong. I really do. But I think, like, what we've seen so far with, like, okay, like I said, James's face being changed, or like how you mentioned how, like, he reacts and stuff like that. Um, I've already kind of given me an indication that, like, they don't really care about what the story is supposed to be like, and they don't really care about what people liked about the original Silent Hill 2.
It
Um,
also implies that they might not have really understood James's character from the original as well, which is it is usually a problem with people doing remakes that claim to be fans of that material, but they might not. Just because they're fans doesn't necessarily always mean they're going to do a faithful remake of it. They might have just completely missed the point of the original for one reason or another, and I feel like that could be the case here. But again, we're just kind of going off of these little things we've gotten in the trailer, and also the tidbits of information that have been revealed so far.
yeah, and like in that regard, because, like, when I think about the original, right, like what makes that game so great, like, yeah, James looks very unassuming, right? Like you would never think that what he actually did, that he ever did it, right? Because he just looks
Yeah.
like a person that like you would never suspect him of that, and I think um, that's one of the great subtle aspects of Silent Hill in general is that they have like they used to at least have really good looking character models that just you know were very unassuming or just very like almost like I guess you can say like they looked like what an average person might actually look like. Where like, hey, you
Mhm.
don't, yeah, they're there, but you don't ever really pay attention to what they're doing or what they actually look like because they're not like very outspoken people or they're not very um, attention getting, so to speak, right? And I
I
think,
think the only
mhm.
example I can think of that kind of goes against that would be like what was it, Henry from Silent Hill 4. Um, him just being kind of he's kind of a little bit of a weird person, like kind of a little bit eccentric. Um, but not exactly like, I guess, if you saw him, you wouldn't really think too much about him, So I mean, I feel like it still kind of fits under that. Um, but he's definitely somewhat more of an eccentric character than compared to like the previous Silent Hill protagonists.
Yeah, yeah, and I think so. Like when I look at like the new iteration of James, I'm just thinking like, okay, well, like it just it just looks bad. Like that's
Yeah.
there's not like there's no way for me to like overextend how I feel about it. I just think it looks bad, and I think that they should change it. Like if
Well,
they really want to.
well, my other concern too is like
Mhm.
that he's going to be like emotionally reacting to things way too much. Whereas in the original, like you said, he comes off very unassuming, and he doesn't really show a lot of his emotion on his face. Whereas in this one, it seems like they're taking like the opposite approach in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, and like you know how I remember Silent Hill 2 is that like he doesn't start showing emotion till like towards the literal end of the game
Yeah.
when things start
Well, and
really
then it
just
would,
breaking
and it
down for
makes
him. Yeah,
sense that he would.
yeah, yeah. So I think and I think going back to like okay, well, like is this blooper team, they claim that they're fans of Silent Hill or just Silent Hill 2, right? And do they really understand, those subtleties? Do they really understand what people like? Or do they just simply mean that they're fans of Silent Hill 2 because of the way that the game played? Which that's another thing
Right.
too, because we
That's
do
actually a
know
good
that
segue. That's a good segue.
yeah, because
Okay.
we do
What do
know
you
like
think? Like, do you
mhm.
think? Well, I'm just gonna say, do you think that they are going to try to faithfully recreate the gameplay, like, that's regarding the combat, the puzzles, all that
No,
stuff. From Yeah.
no, because and I'll tell you why is because people when they were showing like some of the behind the scenes of them just talking to the developers, they had like an off-screen gameplay segment, and they saw that it was over the shoulder. And
Mhm.
you know, I think I've said this with when we were doing this during them announcing all the different Silent Hill projects. And I know I've mentioned this when I was talking about Forever Entertainment with their Fear Effect remake and how they're changing that. Is that they're coming out with an over the shoulder remake for a game where other over the shoulder remakes are coming out or other horror games are already coming out in that playstyle if they're not already out. In this case, half of the games that I talked about in my Forever Entertainment video are out. So Callisto Protocol, um, Dead Space remake, and Resident Evil 4 remake. Right, we're still waiting on what is it? The Alone in the Dark remake, which that's also going to be over the shoulder. Uh,
Mhm.
the Fear Effect remake was originally going to be a fixed cam game. That's over the shoulder now, and we don't
Can
know
I just
when the.
say, seeing all the
Mhm.
footage of that a remake was originally going to be
Yeah,
just pisses me off to no end.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I have no idea why they scrapped that. Um,
Um, yeah. So like, you know, uh, Yeah, so we have that remake and now this remake, and in a time where we're getting like as far as like remakes are concerned, right, or even just triple A horror games. I'm just gonna have it as a blanket statement because not every horror game is a survival horror per se. You would think to try to stand out from all these other games that they would try to keep the original dynamic fixed camera angles because unlike Resident Evil, Silent Hill's fixed cams or dynamic cameras are far more manageable compared to Resident Evil's, in my opinion at least. They've always been that way. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
Yeah,
that's
it definitely Silent Hill definitely yeah,
mm,
it definitely was a lot easier to get into in regards to the camera angles and just controlling your character. Even though, technically they were, I guess you'd say, still like tank controls and fixed camera, but I felt like it was a lot, uh, like you said, yeah, a lot more manageable.
and I
And
think just to keep this tangent of mine short, right? Is that like
well, just I
mhm.
want to add on to it too, just real quick, because I think the idea that that you can't do a remake with fixed camera like it was in the original, I think is BS because we see a lot of indie devs doing the same thing with fixed camera, like because people are saying, well, it can't work anymore in modern games, which I don't think is true. I think it very much still can work if it's done well.
Yeah,
I don't think everything has to be over the shoulder, and I feel like for some games it really doesn't work. Uh, Especially in regards to Silent Hill, because a lot of people, when they think of an over the shoulder Silent Hill game, I feel like a lot of what they're going to be reminded of is the post-team silence stuff, specifically like Silent Hill Downpour and Silent Hill Homecoming, which doesn't conjure up the best memories. So I yeah.
yeah. And well, and what I was gonna get on with that too is that like, okay, well, them changing it, right, is like, okay, well, you know, with all these other games that are coming out, they're all over the shoulder. You have less and less to stand apart. Aside from the fact that it is just Silent Hill, right, and it was perfectly fine the way that it played back the way that it released. Yeah, sure, you could make some adjustments here and there, or maybe you could make some new animations that flow a little bit better. But for the most part, the game played fine. Them changing it to over the shoulder, now you really don't stand out from other horror games in this same playstyle. You just look like a essentially a carbon copy of everything else. And even if they don't necessarily play exactly um, exactly the same to one another, right? The general gameplay and general movement all looks the same at that point, right? So what do
Well,
you
also
have, right? Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, also I was gonna say too, it kind of changes the because like some of the reason why fixed camera was a thing in the first place was it contributed to the horror atmosphere. You would go into a room and then something would slowly be revealed to you or something like that. Like with Silent Hill, they utilized fixed camera to also to contribute to to some of the more scary reveals that would like maybe catch you off guard. I'm wondering how that's if they're going to be able to replicate that in the remake with the over the shoulder, which I honestly I'm going to say I very much doubt they will, um, or if they'll even attempt that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I think like when I think about like Silent Hill, I just don't think that this is gonna work out. Um, this is kind of like it's a weird because like I say the same thing about like Fear Effect remake. I think that should have stayed the way that it was supposed to be as a fixed camera angled game, just to stand apart from all these other remakes. But then when I think about like Alone in the Dark, right, where that's a little bit more of an exception of like, okay, well, most of the Alone in the Dark games, most people don't remember, and most of the people that have played them, they're probably have moved on already and would prefer something a little bit more modern in that case because those games have not
Right.
aged well. So, and that goes for both modern and old. The only one that really stands out in my mind as far as Alone in the Dark goes is New Nightmare, but that's because it was a Resident Evil clone. So it's like so at least in regards to that remake, that to me makes sense as to why they would even want to change the gameplay perspective, right? But for
They also
Silent
did do a
Hill,
lot of interesting things with the 2000, what was it, the 2008 one, even though it was not a very good game.
mhm,
They definitely had some really interesting gameplay mechanics, like being able to look inside your jacket for your inventory, um, and some other things they did that was, just going into first person mode for certain things. Uh, some interesting, and also some of the fire mechanics from what I've seen is kind of interesting, like the fire spread. Um, but yeah, there's some interesting things I tried to do with that game.
but but yeah. Anyway, like the point that I'm trying to make here is that like when you look at like Silent Hill, right? It doesn't make sense like um, why they would want to change it. I mean, I guess it kind of makes
Yeah.
sense in regards to they probably looked at like the Resident Evil 2 remake and they were like, well, Capcom did it and that was successful, so maybe we could do it too. But the difference being is that Capcom also tried to make that game a fixed camera angled game and a first person game before sticking with the over the shoulder for that specific
Right.
remake. So, it's a very it's a very like I guess like disappointing but obvious sign as to like yeah, like this is probably why they did it. I just don't think that they were thinking about like the potential consequences of that, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm fine with them, changing certain things to, quote unquote, modernize it. Like, for
mhm.
instance, again, to compare the Capcom Resident Evil remakes, what they did there, it makes sense with how they kind of, maybe streamlined certain elements, modernized it to a certain degree. But it didn't take away from what the game was supposed to be or what Resident Evil 2 is.
Mhm.
That's what I'm concerned about with Silent Hill 2 remake is that I don't. We're talking about like two very different developers in Capcom and the Bloober team.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't, and I'm mostly just again basing this off of their previous work. I don't have that same confidence that that's how they're going to handle this. Um, and also considering when we're talking about gameplay, we've kind of mentioned the combat, the puzzles. I really am also concerned about that as well because Silent Hill is known for having some fairly complicated puzzles that have a lot of like riddle elements in them. I don't know if I really trust that Bloober Team is gonna deliver that same experience. I definitely think we can expect the puzzles to be dumbed down. Now, to what extent, I don't know. You could say the puzzles in the Resident Evil remakes had been dumbed down to a certain extent too, but those are again, I'm mostly fine with that
Well,
because
Resident Evil's never
it,
really had difficult puzzles per se.
yeah,
Like, so that them changing it to a certain degree doesn't really, it doesn't really hurt that game in the long run. Silent Hill, on the other hand, they literally had to add in a riddle difficulty in Silent Hill 2 because of how
right,
difficult the puzzles were in Silent Hill 1. I can tell you the first fucking time that I did that piano puzzle in Silent Hill 1, I was losing my shit because I couldn't figure it out. I I sat there for hours with my brother trying to figure it out, and we just could not figure it out for like at least a good 5 hours. So
yeah.
yeah. So like
I feel like, and again, just to kind of
mhm.
I could also as well reference, what PT did because I feel like that also had some fairly clever puzzle elements, especially with like trying to get through the demo in general. And it just kind of annoys me because that's just to know what we could have gotten with what would have been Silent Hills and seeing what we have now. I just kind of wish we lived in that timeline where we actually did get Silent Hills
Right,
because
and
the talent that was involved with that, you had Kojima, you had Del Toro, uh, you had they even fucking Junji Ito. I mean, it's like it's almost like the dream team, and then it gets scrapped, and then we have to speculate about what how. I mean, let's be honest, how bad the Silent Hill 2 remake is most likely going to be. Um, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I would love to be proven wrong, but um, I don't know. If I would really rather trade Silent Hills for this,
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think like you bring up a really good point with that too is that like okay, well like you know in the what if scenario of like what if Kojima like actually got to make Silent Hills, right? And that actually came out and he was still at Konami and stuff and you know, could you imagine, right? Like if he was the one handling and like Kojima Productions was handling Silent Hill 2 remake. Like yeah, the
mm,
concern then would be like okay, well, is he going to make it more of a movie and extend the cutscenes to like a ridiculous amount? Probably, but the game is probably also going to be good too, considering how Silent Hills was, at least as a demo, which most people, when they were trying to replicate Silent Hills, they weren't even doing it accurately because they were only focusing on the demo portion and not what the game was going to be, which was a mix of
right.
first person and third person.
But what
So,
I liked about the demo too was it gave us a pretty good taste of what we could expect from
mm-hmm.
the horror aspect. Maybe not so much the gameplay, but what to expect from the atmosphere and the horror, and maybe the story to some extent. Um, we're really not getting much from the Silent Hill 2, what we've seen of the Silent Hill 2 remake. I kind of wish that, that maybe they would have taken a similar approach where we get like a little demo or something just to give us an idea of what we could possibly expect from their version, except, but we just get this trailer. So, um, which it's just, a pre-rendered trailer, so it doesn't really give you too much of an idea of what the final game is really gonna be like. With Silent Hills and PT, like of course, yeah, we didn't know what the final game was gonna be like, but we
But you
had a
could play it.
like I said, yeah, yeah, we had like a general like idea, so like it got people excited, it got people hyped. I just don't really feel like it's the same with this Silent Hill 2 remake. Um, we know what Silent Hill 2 is, we know what it's supposed to be, but we don't know if this remake is going to be the same. Is going to be the same in that regard.
Yeah, and that's the concerning thing, right? Because like, you know, you and I could talk about it for hours on end, right? But until they actually show off
Yeah.
gameplay, which again, like gameplay could end up being fine. We don't really know, right? And they might even release a demo. We don't know, right? That's more of a wait and see. But really getting into it now, like talking about. Do you want to talk about blooper statement, or do you think we should talk about the writer statement first? Um,
Uh,
because I
I
think
feel like we should talk about like I guess we should talk about Blooper's statement because it comes directly from them. The writer is just more it's more he's talking about I think he's talking about like game remakes in general. So um, probably make more sense to talk about what Blooper said.
okay. So yeah. So why don't we talk about blooper statement? Because like I want to talk about this, right, and then this will kind of lead into why like again like I'm not really confident in this remake, and I not to speak for chaos here, but it's partially why
Hmm.
he would also be concerned, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, let
I want
me
to give him the benefit of the doubt, but yeah, I definitely have some concerns.
yeah, let me go ahead and read off this statement here. As the blooper team, I should also note that there are probably grammatical errors in this. If I'm not mistaken, blooper team is also based in Poland, so
I think
English
so,
is
yeah.
not their first language, so that's not their particular fault. So just be aware if I'm reading it and it sounds a little bit weird, it's probably because of a language barrier issue. So, anyway, as the blooper team, we don't comment on rumors. However, this time we need to take the floor as some recent statements have been taken out of context due to inaccurate translations. Our company's message did not contain sales forecast of specific titles. The figures connected to Silent Hill 2 refer to the potential success of the type of games we will be focusing on in the future. It is also not true that we have announced that Silent Hill 2 is ready for release. Regardless of the development stage, all of our activities are focused on obtaining the quote unquote highest quality for the finished product, the quality that fans of Silent Hill 2 deserve. I put a big question mark on that one. We are aware that players are waiting for more information about Silent Hill 2. As soon as such information becomes available, we are sure that Konami, the publisher for the game, will share it with fans. Thank you for the support, or thank you for your support, and we will continue to do our best to provide high quality games that give players the best emotional experience possible. So I don't know if you want to say something about this first, or if you want me to go.
You can go ahead.
Okay, so as far as I'm aware, this is mostly in relation to. I think there was some rumor going around about them expecting like 5 million sales for this remake, and that I think this is also in reference to the writer statement about the quality of this game, hence why they had to emphasize quality that quote unquote fans of Silent Hill 2 deserve. Um, I can't wait for that to end up on poorly aged things if it turns out to be bad, because that'll be something, wouldn't it? But to me, it's more or less damage control of the possibility that they might have been saying that, hey, yeah, we're expecting Silent Hill 2 to sell 5 million units, and if it doesn't, then that means Silent Hill 2 will potentially die again, or that Konami is not going to even bother with the other Silent Hill games in terms of like remaking them, or ever just touching this franchise for like the next 10 to 15 years, perhaps.
Mhm.
But I think really just focusing on that quality aspect, that is in more so reference in with what the ex writer for some of the previous Silent Hill games was saying about that.
Yeah, I didn't really know the full context of the rumors they were referring to, so yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess I mean, it really kind of makes sense to them. They would make a statement about it. Um, but I feel like I'd like to see them prove that, that it's going to be a quality game other than just kind of, I mean, I get it from a business standpoint. You want to make a PR statement, but um, I don't know. I'm more of the mindset. I mean, that's all well and good, but I'd like to see what you guys have to offer and not just, words, because words are meaningless. I want you to prove it with your actions, and that's just giving me an actual good remake. Um, so that's really as far as my whole opinion on that. Uh, I just want to see if just actually prove that it's actually going to be quality remake and not just, because otherwise your words are meaningless to me. So I want you to
It's
actually prove that it's going to be good.
it's a
Uh,
thing of like any company could say that they're going to make a quality game even if it's
right.
shit, right? Like any company could do that. Hell,
Yeah.
Capcom was doing it when when they were releasing mediocre games back in the early 2010s. So it's not like it's not out of the realm of possibility that yeah they're saying that, but what they think is quality is not necessarily what the fans think is quality, right?
Well, yeah, of course.
But
Everybody has different ideas of what that means to them.
right, and again that also means that what Silent Hill 2 remake is going to be like remains to be seen officially, right, and in full to a much bigger extent, right? Full extent would be like by the time release would be, but like a much bigger extent as to what the game is going to really be like, where much more harsher criticism at that point is, I think, justified, right? Um,
Yeah.
when more of that information is out. Now, as far as again, them saying, them talking about like the sales forecast and stuff like that. Again, I understand them as a company wanting to talk about that, right? And just being like, yeah, we didn't necessarily say that Silent Hill 2 has to be selling this much, but they did also technically say they weren't against the idea of saying that by saying the potential success of the type of games that they'll be focusing on. Because for all we know,
Right.
they might want to focus on, they might have a much longer partnership with Konami, right? And they might be working on multiple Silent Hill projects for all we know, right?
Well, or it's just that this game is going to be what I guess proves to Konami that they're worthy of, I suppose, working on future projects, uh, depending on how it sells.
Right. So with that in mind, I think we should probably talk about the um, ex Silent Hill writer. Now, the
Mhm.
headline specifically states that, or quotes them as saying, ex Silent Hill writer says remake might upset people. Um, and, they quote things by saying, like, oh, well, like, the ex creators of the game believes that the game is a or could be a poison chalice. Um, uh, and they were going on about how, let's see, uh, they were
Basically, like what he was saying was that uh
I was actually trying to,
he's like wary about remakes in general, I guess.
yeah, so because I was actually trying to pull this up in the article here. So they personally believe that the Silent Hill 2 remake will have a quote unquote safe approach to any changes. Um,
Hmm.
or actually, I'm sorry,
This is more
that's
so
quoting.
speculation on his part, I guess. Like, unless he actually knows things, or has some like behind the scenes knowledge of what's going on.
Yeah, and he's stating like, oh well, like he's not really excited about playing quote unquote remasters in general, which, um, if you really like look into to what he's talking about here, because I'm just kind of glossing over it here really quick. Really, it's just his concern of like everything getting a remake or a remaster. Not
Yeah.
so specifically about Silent Hill 2 itself, uh, although he is mentioning that he does wish the team good luck, but he's not particularly sure how Silent Hill 2 can be quote unquote remastered without upsetting people. Technically, it was already remastered and it did upset people, so you're
Yeah.
half wrong. Uh, so technically, what he's saying is kind of already happened. But
Yeah.
as the person who wrote this article stated, that they mentioned that they're not quite correct in that Silent Hill 2 is a full blown remake as opposed to a routine remaster, which they mentioned like, okay, yeah, we've had like really decent or really good examples with like the Resident Evil remakes, which fixed some of the issues that the original games had and stuff like that. But with that in mind, just kind of going off of that idea of like, yeah, the remake might upset people, right? Yeah, I mean that's kind of to be expected. I mean that's typical with any sort of remake, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, there's still. I mean, a lot of people praise more recently Resident Evil 4 remake, but then there are quite a few people who are upset about it. So I mean, it's a case where you just can't please everybody.
Yeah,
Um. Yeah. Uh. But I mean, again, kind of a different situation. Um,
yeah,
I think there's a little bit more cause for concern here.
yeah. I also don't know how much of how much faith you want to put into a person who's written the stories for Origins and Shattered
Yeah.
Memories. So
See, when I first saw the headline, I thought it was one of the Team Silent people,
that's
but
what I thought.
then I found out what games he worked on. I was like, oh, oh,
Oh, so
yeah,
maybe there's. I mean, he might not be wrong, right? But that doesn't
yeah,
necessarily mean that it's like, okay, well, like, well, what the fuck did you write? so
yeah.
so, but
I mean,
with
he's coming from two games that are considered fairly mediocre in and of themselves. So I mean, it's I'd say take his opinions with a grain of salt. But I mean, I would agree with his overall sentiment that yeah, it's like um, remakes. It always tends to um, it always has a tendency to upset people just because it's remaking something that is beloved. I would say by quite a few people. So you always run that risk regardless of if, when you're remaking something like this.
yeah, and I think you know when thinking about this like particular remake too, it's like as some of the even like some of the developers that were formerly in Team Silent that have come back to work on this remake as well, because they do have some people that were former Team Silent members coming back, right?
Masahiro Ito.
Masahiro Ito is back, and Akira Yamaoka, and I think there was one other person as well that was coming back. So like, in that regard, like yeah, that like yeah, they are back, right? And there is that potential that yeah, like you know, they are making changes as they've mentioned, changes to the story as well as like they mentioned, like okay, well, like James is older now. Um, in the grand scheme of things, it could be could turn out really well, right? And some of the changes, even though might not have been the greatest change, like it might not have the biggest impact, right?
Yeah.
So it's really just a in time. We'll see how things turn out. Hopefully, there are more trailers that indicate what to expect in terms of the changes for the story, and also just more of a breakdown on gameplay. I think because that's the other thing too is that I know like you would definitely want to see just as much as I would.
Yeah, that's kind of the biggest. That's kind of the biggest question in my head. I mean, of course, everything to do with the story as well, because the story is really important. But I am very curious as to how they're going to handle the gameplay, especially knowing they're changing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think with all that said, is there any final thoughts that we can get across here before we wrap things up?
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, final thoughts. Yeah, I want to be optimistic about it. I want to believe that Bloober Team is going to prove me wrong. If anything, I want them to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just don't know. And then I I'm really just basing my opinion, like I said, off of what I've seen from what they've done previously. Uh, I am hoping that the fact that they are fans, um, they want to do that. Maybe they want to do something that is faithful to the original game, but they want to maybe you know, put somewhat of a new spin on it, hopefully in a good way. But it's just, regardless, it's going to be really difficult. This is a game that is a lot of people's favorite. It's one of the, I think a lot of people would say one of the best survival horror games that's ever been made. And I mean, it's just a high bar. And the Bloober Team, it's just that, I just don't know. I don't know if they can, if they can give us anything close to, the original game. And I just, I would, if I was a betting man, I'd say no. I would say they won't. Just again, based on everything I know, I don't think they will. But I desperately, if anything, I desperately want them to prove me wrong.
Yeah.
That's all I can really say. I just don't think we really have enough at the moment, other than what we've seen in the trailer, to really go off of. And until we have more, unfortunately, I just can't really say too much other than I really hope that it's going to live up to the original. Um, I feel like I I don't know. I want to be optimistic, but I tend to be pessimistic more often than not, to be honest. And I want to say like the best we can probably hope for is um, something that is at least somewhat decent,
Hmm.
if anything. But I don't know. I don't really have too much else to say though. I don't know. I don't know. What are your final thoughts about
So,
all of it?
so I think like I really want to be proven wrong, just like you. I do want to see. I want to see a game that's technically this is a franchise that is inherently Japanese, and handing it off to Western devs, I think, is Konami's biggest mistake. Unless if you were going to hand this over to like say Blue Point, right? Which I think that's what they should have done to begin with, is make this and I dare to say it, like Sony exclusive, right? But like if you had just worked with Sony, had Blue Point do it, they would have done a 1-to-1 remake for the most part. Yeah, there might have been some changes here and there, but like just given their track record with their remasters and their remakes, they've had a more consistent track record. And I think as if you were
Yeah.
gonna hire a Western dev team, that's the team that I would have went with. Um, or I would have went with a team that maybe has a better understanding of what Silent Hill is. And I think the dev team that worked on Tormented Souls probably would have been a better idea. I know that's like an indie dev team, but would have been a better idea. Um, there was an indie dev that was working on this indie game that was very much Silent Hill inspired, called Simulacrum, but that hasn't been really updated as far as I know. So I don't know if they could have really gotten a hold of that particular individual.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just I think like if not them, just anybody else that isn't just not a Western dev, and I hate to say it, right, but it's like you know Blooper Team, much like most other Polish developers, they're and I'm just throwing my own people under the bus here, just so you all know before people decide, oh well, like we're gonna cancel you, dude. Fuck you if you try. Um, yeah, just to throw my own people under the bus, right? Like Polish people like to cut corners, and unless if you're fucking CD Project Red, which technically they've also cut corners with how Cyberpunk 2077, that's what it was, right?
Yeah.
Um, how they cut corners with Cyberpunk, right? Unless if you're CD Project Red, you're not quality here. You're just not, and that's just the sad reality of it. It's just look at how I talked about Forever Entertainment and look no further than that, because I just do not see any potential here um, in terms of you want good quality devs. They're just not here in Poland, and I think it's just I think it's a thing of like publishers maybe trying to save costs by coming here and trying to hire developers that'll work for cheap, but who also don't understand what people like about these games or why these games are good to begin with. Again, that's just me throwing my own people under the bus, and I'm just being, flat out honest. And I think, if you were going to hire a dev team to work on Silent Hill, you should probably either pick Blue Point or pick a developer that's based in Japan or who understands what Silent Hill actually is. Not just people
Yeah.
who like Silent Hill, because this is what Konami has done in the past. They pick people who like Silent Hill, but not who understand Silent Hill, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
we've had examples of that, like with everything that happened post Team Silent.
So, but again, I want to be proven wrong. I want to see, if I haven't, like I said, I haven't played any of Blooper's games, so I don't know the quality of their games per se, of like from firsthand
Mm.
experience. And I want to be proven wrong, and I want to see, if they can actually do it. But I also want to see too, like, if they could at least make a decent enough game, because I think in best case scenario, right, it might not be a good Silent Hill 2 remake, but it might be a decent enough Silent Hill to at least, you know, at least for them to maybe make another Silent Hill that's just not a remake, right? Um,
Yeah.
so like I think that's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they somehow manage to be worse than Tom Hewlett's team. Um, so
No, I think you're probably right. Unfortunately, I foresee that's the most likely scenario. Um,
yeah,
Worse than Tom Hewlett, I don't know. Maybe,
you have to be
maybe,
really
maybe.
trying.
You got to be really bad.
And that's a whole nother story in on itself, because like that, if you know the full context of that, that wasn't even fully Tom Hewlett's fault. It was mostly like the people that he was working with, but he gets all the
Yeah,
blame because he was the poster boy, right? So it happens, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say here is that, like, I want this remake to be good. I really do,
hmm
but a lot of signs just between them just saying, hey, like, yeah, well, like, we never said anything about the sales, and we want to deliver a quality game. It's like, yeah, I don't really think you are, though, because what you've shown so far and what people have talked about so far, that is actually legitimate stuff, right?
yeah,
Isn't really looking too hot.
yeah, yeah. It just kind of it just worries me. But again, I guess this is just a wait and see thing. I mean, at this point, um, but yeah, I don't know if you want to go ahead and just do outros because I think
Yeah,
we've pretty much covered everything we can with what we have so far.
yeah,
I
everything
guess
for
if more
now, yeah.
information comes out about this, we can always talk more about it. I'd definitely be interested to talk about it more once we get some gameplay because that's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Like,
or even more story details, if anything, just to just give us a better idea of what we have in store for this remake.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Like, yeah. So when that time comes, when there's more information, and if they do like more Silent Hill showcases, for example, like, and they talk about some of the other Silent Hill projects, like, yeah, we could definitely do it, especially with some of the other guys that are really interested in Silent Hill as well.
mm,
But that being said, we pretty much said what we can. So why don't we go ahead and do outros? So, Chaos, where can we find you, good sir?
you can find me on YouTube and Twitter at Captain Chaos. You can also find me on Instagram at Enigmatic Arts.
Awesome. And then you all know me as Biodevil Dom. You can find me as Biodevil_Dom on YouTube and on Twitter. I am moving soon again, so there's going to be a small point in time potentially where I am not making content. So you might see more of Chaos on the podcast here. So that
Well, when
being
I'm not busy with real life stuff, yeah.
yeah. But that being said, in the time being where I do still have some time to upload, I just wanted to let you all know that. So in case if you all see me disappear again, that's why. But yeah, that being said, we will. Well, we hope you all enjoyed today's podcast, and we will see you all on the next one.
That's